Hello, everyone. So excited to be here for your ergonomic glow up today. Who doesn't like a good glow up, right? Today, we're talking about ergonomics, posture, and real changes you can make today or whenever you go into the operatory next that will improve your ergonomics and really how you feel both in and out of the op. First off, I want to thank Crest for inviting me to give this presentation on their platform and spread the word about ergonomics. It's always a good day when we can talk about ergonomics and self-care. So today you're going to get a lot of tips, some stretches, and some good equipment choices that will help you feel better and protect your body now and for the length of your career. Just FYI, this is a lot of information in a relatively short amount of time. I'm used to giving much longer lectures, but today I've narrowed it down to what I think are the most important things for you to remember. But keeping that in mind, it's a lot of information. You're not going to retain everything that I talk about today. So I'm going to have a QR code and a link for some handouts where you will get a full PDF of all of the slides from today just to keep in your back pocket whenever you want to have something to review. And just a little bit about me, my name is Stephanie Botts. I am a dental hygienist. I've been practicing dental hygiene for 18 years. I cannot believe I'm pushing 20 years at this point, but that's where we are. I'm also an ergonomic specialist. I founded my company, Polished Posture, about 5 years ago, and I've helped hundreds of dental clinicians at this point with their ergonomics and posture. It's something I'm very passionate about because I too struggled with pain and poor ergonomics. Something else I do is create a lot of content like this. I do a lot of CE and education, but I also create a lot of content for social media. So you're going to see a QR code scattered through the webinar. I create a lot of how-to videos, and there's a lot of more in-depth videos that I have on some of the things that we're talking about today. So just keep an eye out for that little QR code. You'll see it on the slides, but it's a resource library that I've put together for you. So if you scan the QR code or click the link that's in the course information called Resource Library, you will put in your name and email, and then you'll get an email with all of these hyperlinks for videos and posts that dive deeper into the topics that we're talking about today. So it's a great resource. It's free. And honestly, that's part of my goal, is to create as much free, accessible, ergonomic content as I can. If you want to connect with me or learn more about me, just Google Stephanie Botts and you'll find me. But something I've done over the past 5 years is I have done hundreds of assessments at this point on dental clinicians, hygienists, dentists, assistants. And I've noticed with that we do a lot of the same things. Like, we make a lot of the same mistakes. And that's part of what inspired this lecture. I've put together what I think are the most important tips and hacks for you to know based off of these assessments that I've done. Here is the QR code for the handouts. If you're not able to scan this QR code, the link is also in the course information, but you just click it or scan this QR code, put in your name and email, and then you'll automatically get emailed a full PDF of all of the slides from today. And again, that link is in the course information. So I'm going to move on here just so that I'm always, like, the thing I'm most conscious of is time. So I want to make sure that we finish on time. All right, so we are covering a lot today in a short amount of time. We're going to talk about these cumulative stress patterns and musculoskeletal disorders that affect us in dentistry. We'll also talk about how you can start integrating ergonomic strategies and movement breaks into your clinical day. I'm passionate about spreading ergonomic tips, but something else I'm really passionate about is something called micro breaks. If anyone already follows me on social, you've probably heard me talking about these a lot, but I talk about them a lot because they work. So you're going to see some examples of my favorite micro breaks scattered throughout. Here is the QR code for that resource library. And again, if you can't scan the code, the link is in the course information, but I have a full video playlist of all of the micro breaks that I recommend. And these are based on the muscles that we overuse the most in dentistry. So they're not just random stretches, like, I'm recommending them for a reason. We're going to talk about operator and patient positioning to really help you feel your best in the op. And then we'll talk a bit about equipment towards the end of the lecture. I know there's a lot of equipment out there, and there's some great marketing that maybe makes us think that things work when maybe they don't. So I'm hoping to clear that up for you towards the end. We in dentistry are the preventive experts, right? That's the foundation of what we learn in school is prevention. And we talk to our patients all day long about prevention, wearing their night guard or doing their remineralization treatments or doing their x-rays, coming in for their appointments, because we understand that if they take these preventive actions now, they will be preventing larger consequences later on, like perio or bombed out teeth or having to get implants or whatever it is. So we understand that when it comes to the patient perspective. Where that gets lost is when it comes to us. And maybe we don't take our own advice, right? Maybe we aren't as aggressive preventively as we should be, but we need to take that same preventive mindset and point it back towards us in the form of learning ergonomics, like what we're doing today, investing in good equipment, if you need that, stretching, strengthening. There's so many other things like nutrition and diet and sleep that we don't necessarily have time for today, but we have to be really aggressive preventively so that we don't end up with these musculoskeletal disorders that are just rampant in dentistry. The pain rates in dentistry are crazy high and they do not need to be, but we just haven't, I don't think we've done a great job at stressing the importance of ergonomics. And when I talk about ergonomics or tell people what I do, they automatically sit or stand up straight, right? Because they think it's posture. And posture is a really important part of it, but there's a lot of other aspects to ergonomics as well. Just to put it simply, it's the science of fitting the workplace to the worker, not the other way around, which is what a lot of us do. I know I used to do that. But we need to take our workplace, and that's if we think of our operatory, it's everything in our operatory that isn't us. So it's our stool, it's our patient chair, it's our patient and how they're positioned, it's our instruments and where things are organized. All of those things should be adjusted to fit us in something called neutral posture, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. But what a lot of us tend to do, myself included, how I used to practice, is we charge into the operatory and we start contorting ourselves to fit our equipment, right? Reaching, twisting, hunching, going upside down, whatever it is. We need to flip that and make sure that everything in that op is adjusted to fit us. And that's what I'm hoping that you will learn at the end of today's lecture. And the goal of ergonomics really is to prevent injury. And like I mentioned, we in dentistry are very prone to injury because of things like poor posture. Our jobs can be highly repetitive and we have muscle imbalances. So we have the overuse and underuse of certain muscles. That's something I talk about in one of my longer lectures, but that's a risk factor for us getting injured. And I wish I could tell you, just go get this one pair of loops or go get this one stool or whatever, and everything is going to be fine. It's not that simple. Equipment does matter and it plays a huge part, but we have to make sure that we're under control as far as our posture and our ergonomics. I've done assessments on clinicians that have all of the things. They have the ergo loops, they have the saddle stool and the cordless handpiece, but their ergonomics still aren't great because they're twisting or they're reaching a million times a day. So ergonomics is the combination of making changes to ourselves, our equipment, and making sure that we're using both correctly. All right, this is our first micro break. Let me explain what this is. And just due to time, I don't have time to demo all of these stretches that I'm going to be talking about today, but I wanted to at least touch on them. Remember, you're going to have a full video playlist in that resource library sent to you that walks you through every single micro break and how to do it. I also have a Dental Day Reset little mini course on my top 2 micro breaks here on the Dental Care platform. So you can search for that and take that too. This stretch is included in that. But it doesn't matter what position you are in dentistry. If you're a dentist, assistant, hygienist, all of us overwork these upper traps. And why is that? It's because we've got our shoulders up in our ears. Maybe we're out in the chicken wing. Maybe we're reaching overhead or reaching out in front of us. Our head is forward. All of that contracts these traps. This is a muscle you do not want to be rock hard, FYI, because once this upper trap starts to become really tight and dysfunctional, we have issues both above and below. People can have tension headaches, migraines, jaw issues, shoulder problems, upper, mid, low back issues, hip issues, all because these upper traps are just too tight. But let me explain what I'm going to talk about the micro break here in a second, but I want to explain why we need them. Okay. We in dentistry are prone to something called isometric contraction. So our muscles are just constantly contracted without a break. I'm going to do the chicken wing as an example because we all do it, right? I even catch myself doing it sometimes. But when I'm out here in chicken wing, I have isometric contractions of these muscles here that are really straining to hold my arm up. The longer a muscle is contracted, you have pressure that's building up on the inside of that muscle and it cuts off blood flow. And we all know that blood carries oxygen and nutrients, removes waste products, right? So if I've got a group of muscles here that's working overtime and it's not getting the nutrition it needs, it will start to fail in the form of pain, fatigue. Maybe I can't even hold my arm up anymore. And the longer I'm doing this, that muscle becomes damaged. It has a complete lack of blood flow. And then those muscle fibers start to die. And then that puts me on the road to developing like a neck injury or a shoulder injury. But it's all because of lack of blood flow. It's all about blood flow when we're talking about injury prevention. So what these micro breaks do is it feels good because it's a stretch, especially this one. If you do it, you'll notice how good it feels. But with these micro breaks, what you want to do is hold it for at least 20 seconds, because at that 20-second mark, that pressure that I was talking about reduces. You have blood that flows back into that muscle and starts healing some of that damage. So when I'm doing assessments, I do see clinicians stretching, which is great, but they do it for like a second here or a second there. What we really need to do is be very intentional with these micro breaks. Just take a few seconds, hold it for at least 20 seconds. Bonus points if you take some deep breaths. That way that blood can start to flow in and heal that damage. So I recommend these about every 20 minutes for about 20 seconds, no matter what micro break you're doing. But this is to prevent musculoskeletal disorders or MSDs. These are the things that take us out of practice. These are injuries or disorders of any part of the musculoskeletal system. And I want to note with these, this is not an acute onset injury. This isn't like me walking outside and spraining my ankle and I immediately know something's wrong. This is typically a slow roll and it progresses almost like perio, really. It starts in the cells, it's asymptomatic, at least at first, and that damage has to accumulate to a certain point until it hits this tipping point, and then we start to feel pain or fatigue, or we notice that we don't have the range of motion anymore. But typically, once people become symptomatic in the form of pain, spasms, tingling, even neuropathy type symptoms, that disease process has been happening for quite some time. So it's not like they just immediately did something and then they hurt themselves right then. Usually, and that was the case with me, I had a low back injury. I didn't all of a sudden show up to work and have my back go out. I mean, I did, but the damage was happening years before that, if that makes sense. So MSDs typically don't feel good. They're not pleasant once you become symptomatic, but I want to encourage you, if you feel any of these things, either once every now and then or chronically, please figure out what's going on. The general rule of thumb is if you have persistent pain for over 2 weeks, get it checked out. And don't do what I did. I started feeling pain in my back and I literally was like, I don't have time for this. I'm going to ignore this. Not a good call. These don't get easier to treat over time. They can become very hard to treat over time. And then it's really hard to get back to who you were before the injury. So pain is never normal. I think that we in dentistry have normalized pain because most of us are in pain, but just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal. So please figure it out. These are the most common MSDs in dental clinicians. Carpal tunnel is still number one amongst dental hygienists, but we've got all of these other issues too. And why are these so bad? Why are we so prone to them? It's because we're not practicing in neutral posture. Neutral posture is the position of the body where we have the most support with the least amount of muscle engagement. We want to use our skeleton either when we're standing or when we're sitting. Our bones are nice and thick and hard and they don't fatigue like our soft tissue does. So if our skeleton is in alignment and our bones are stacked up a certain way, we can hold that position without getting tired because our muscles aren't doing the work. What happens though when we break neutral, like the chicken wing, or have our head forward, which we're going to talk about later, that takes away the power of the skeleton, and then it transfers that responsibility for holding that position to our soft tissue. That is not the job of our soft tissue and our musculoskeletal system. That's why we start getting tired and fatigued and injured. So if you're looking at someone from the side or yourself from the side, I call this my yardstick rule. I'm going to give you some benchmarks here. Starting from the top, we want the ear vertically stacked on top of the shoulder. So right on top of the shoulder. We in dentistry tend to have our heads forward, right? Or even if you think of cell phones, I mean, people are hunched over their cell phones. That's not the yardstick rule. That's a forward head position. So we need to think about keeping our head up and back to get the ear vertically stacked on top of the shoulder. If you're standing, moving down, that should be in line with the hip, and then that should be in line with the foot. So if you were standing in neutral posture, I should be able to come and put a yardstick up next to you, and it would hit your ear, shoulder, hip, and foot all at the same time. That's ideal. And I'll show you pictures of seated neutral posture in a little bit. This is another micro break that I really recommend. Our chest muscles, our pecs here get very tight. A lot of us are aware of our tight traps, but not a lot of people are aware of how tight their chest is until they start stretching it, and then they realize how tight it is. But as these chest muscles become really tight, they get short and they pull the shoulders forward, causing this like rounded shoulder appearance. And this is the start of that hunched over or the dental hunchback, because the chest is literally just pulling the shoulders out of alignment. But what happens is we get very tight on the front side here, but then on the back side in our back, our muscles become really long and stretched out and weak. That's an example of a muscle imbalance, just FYI. I know we don't have time to cover that today, but that is a risk factor, especially for like a rotator cuff or shoulder problem. So really important to stretch out the chest. Now let's look at neutral posture in the operatory. This is another benchmark I want to talk to you about. I call it the elbow rule. If you look at this picture here on the left, I want you to look at where the patient's mouth is, and then look at where my elbow is. It's pretty parallel, right? We want the forearms parallel to the floor. So we need the patient's mouth low enough. Usually I see the patient's mouth too high, but we need the patient's mouth low enough so it's parallel with our elbows when we're sitting in a nice neutral position. That way we're not out in chicken wing, we don't have our shoulders in our ears, and we have a nice clear line of sight down into the patient's mouth. I do want to mention one of the reasons I can have such good posture. I mean, if you look at my posture from the side, I'm doing the yardstick thing. I've got my ear vertically stacked on top of my shoulder. That's in line with my hip. I'm not standing, but my feet are flat on the floor. And then I've got my arms close to my sides. One of the reasons I can have such good posture like this is because I'm using ergonomic loops, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But these, the ones I use are deflection style loops, where you've got the bend in the scope so that you can see down into the patient's mouth. I am going to elaborate more on that a little bit later when we talk about equipment, but I think these loops, they have tremendously helped me. I wouldn't be able to have such good posture in the operatory if I didn't have these loops, and stools also. I am a fan of a really good saddle stool. Again, I'll talk about that a little bit later, but those two things really promote great posture for me. But let's talk, and I've seen it with my clients too. I mean, they're game changers for everyone. Okay, so let's look at how we don't practice in neutral posture. Here, I mentioned we want the forearms parallel to the floor. Clearly, his are not. So he just needs to recline his patient down, right? But what happens with us in dentistry is we're notorious for saying, I'm just going to do this real quick. He's probably just saying, I'm going to check this tooth real quick. But is it ever really real quick? I mean, a lot of times we're there for a lot longer than we think we should be, or it becomes this weird habit that we start returning to over time. So whether you're sitting down for a quick check or you're going to be there for a while, make sure that you're setting yourself up for success and reclining that patient down to get their mouth in line with your elbow. And our wrists do some crazy things when we're practicing. I honestly don't think it's possible to have a completely neutral wrist when we're working on the teeth. If you can do it, great. I would love to see how you can do it, but I talk about ergonomics all the time. I still see patients and my wrist does some crazy things. But when I teach ergonomics, it's not about being perfect. It's about being aware. So if you notice that your wrist is doing something crazy, see if you can move your clock position or move your head or your patient's head around to straighten your wrist out. If not, it's okay. Just do what you need to do and then get back into a healthier posture. We just need to recognize where we're kind of in these danger zones and get out of them as quick as we can. But I mean, I'm an ergonomic specialist and I still do crazy things with my wrist. Sometimes I still am out in the chicken wing, depending on if I'm working in a tough area, but the key is not to live there. And then we've got the chicken wings. So it's not possible for us to just have our arms glued to our sides all day, right? Like we wouldn't be able to get anything done. We can have our arms out from our sides about 20 degrees and still be okay. But once we start exceeding that 20 degrees and really getting crazy, like what I'm doing or what's shown here in the picture, that is a rotator cuff neck injury waiting to happen. This clinician here, I worked with her a few years ago, and she was super young, fit, healthy, but she was in pain all day long. And in this situation, she reclined her patient down. Right when she reclined her patient down, those arms came up. And this wasn't a quick photo I just happened to get. She was like this pretty much the entire time. That entire hour, her arms were elevated like this. And she had 8 more patients after that. It's like, no wonder she was in pain. So a lot of this is just being aware. She saw herself in photos. By the way, you don't even need me for this. Just have someone in your office snap some photos of you while you don't know that they're doing it. And you'll learn a lot. It's humbling, but you learn a lot. So she learned a lot just by seeing herself in these photos. And then we reorganized her operatory. She got a new stool, and then she was able to bring those arms down. Something else too that I see, not 100% of the time, but pretty dang close, is the chicken wing of the non-dominant hand with the mirror, our retracting arm. So I've got a tip for you a little bit later on that. And then we've got forward head position. I feel like we in dentistry, this is where a lot of us live, right? Because we're hunched over patients all day, but we're now seeing it with things like cell phones and laptops. It's like life is just forcing our head forward, but it's bad. Because every inch that ear is out in front of the shoulder, like what I'm showing there in the yellow, that's 10 extra pounds of pressure to the spine. So that's an old picture of me. That was actually when I was trying to figure out my own ergonomics. I had my office, it's before I went back to school and got certified, but I was in so much pain. I was like, what am I doing wrong here? So I had my office manager take some photos of me, and this is where my head was positioned. So I would say I'm 3 to 4 inches ahead of my shoulder. That's 30 to 40 extra pounds of pressure to my spine. For no reason. Well, there was a reason. One, I wasn't aware, but also I was using loops that weren't ergonomic. And I really hate to say that because we spend so much money on our loops and we just assume that they're all ergonomic. For something to be ergonomic, it needs to support you in neutral posture, which is the ear vertically stacked on top of the shoulder. So these loops I would put them on. I would have to strain my head out in front of me like a turtle and tip it down to look at my patient. Like that's a no-no. If we need to tip our head forward, we want our ear vertically stacked on top of our shoulder to protect our neck. Then we can tip our head forward. But if you have to jut it out forward like I did and tip it back, I mean, it's so much strain for the back. So now I practice like this, like the picture on the right. I'm using ergonomic loops. They're the deflection style, like I mentioned, and I can see down into my patient's mouth. And again, whether you're seated or standing, you want the patient's mouth at your elbow level. I do recommend standing, not all the time. Alternating sitting and standing is best. If I could get everyone to do like a 50-50 split of sitting and standing, that would be great. It promotes blood flow, which helps our muscles. Your legs aren't in the way, so it can help with positioning, especially with difficult patients. And then you usually have better visibility. Plus, you're using different muscles when you stand versus when you sit, so it kind of like spreads the load out. All right, we've got another micro break here, and this is focusing on the forearm flexors. This is the second micro break that's included in that Dental Day Reset video that I have here on the Dental Care platform. I also have a full video of this in that resource library as well. But this one is really important for our forearm muscles because we have the death grip when we're holding on to things. If you think about when we're practicing, we are constantly holding on to something, whether it's our handpiece, suction, air, water, instruments, mirror, whatever it is, and we're just holding it like our life depends on it. So first tip is just really lighten that grip. You want as light a grip as necessary without dropping whatever it is you're holding. But what happens when these forearm muscles get really tight is they also get very short and they start to pull on the tendons and ligaments in the wrist and the elbow. And then people start to get symptoms of tendonitis, tennis elbow, carpal tunnel, all because these forearm muscles are just so dang tight. If anyone has gone and gotten a massage and they start digging into your forearms, like you realize how tight they are. It's excruciating. So make sure you check out that resource library that has a full demo video of this in there as well. So this one's really important when you know that you've been holding on to something for a long time. If you've been doing a long SRP appointment, if you've been holding the suction for a long time, if you're a doc and you've been holding that handpiece for a long time, those handpieces are so heavy and we just have to hold on to them so tightly. Make sure that this is a micro break that you do. Okay, so we're going to go into the operatory now. So now I'm going to hit you with what I think are the most important things for you to know. And I'm hoping at the end of this, you will at least learn one thing, hopefully more, little tips that you can actually use in the operatory when you go in there next. But when we go into our op, we want to start with ourselves and set ourselves up for success before we start working on the patient. So you're going to adjust your stool. I'm going to talk about stool adjustments on the next slide. You're going to organize all of your equipment, and then you're going to focus on the patient. You're going to lean them back, get them in the right position, which we'll also cover today. But it all starts with you. Okay, so let's talk about adjusting your stool. And I have a full video. I have done so many videos on this, you guys, on how to adjust your stool, but this is so important. If you think about how many hours we're sitting on our stool at the end of the day, week, month, year, like that's a long time. And if we're using stools that 1, are not ergonomic, 2, don't fit us, or 3, aren't adjusted correctly, that will put us at risk for injury. So this is so important. Okay, when you sit on your stool, there's stools that have backrests and some that don't, right? So if you have a stool that has a backrest, you want to make sure you feel that backrest against your back. Okay, it's there for a reason. You don't want to be perched all the way on the edge of the stool. You want your butt all the way back on that stool so that the backrest is against your back. And then this part of the seat pan, the part of the stool that your butt sits on, is called the seat pan. You actually want that tipped forward a little bit. So a lot of people don't even realize they can adjust their stool like this. If there's a paddle somewhere on the underside of your stool that you don't know what it does, it probably is the seat pan adjustment. So just play with that. But you want to tip it forward just a little bit, not so much that you feel like you're going to slide out of the chair, but just a little. And what this does is it opens up the angle of the hips. We in dentistry have very tight hip flexors. And a lot of it is because we're sitting on stools that aren't ergonomic, that aren't adjusted right, and we're leaning forward at the hips, right? So that it all really tightens up the hip flexors. But tight hips directly translates to low back issues. So we need to make sure that we keep the hip angle as open as we can. So tipping the seat pan forward just a little bit will do that. Something else that helps is the height of the stool. You want the height of the stool so that it allows your hips to be above your knees. You want your thighs to slope down towards the floor like what's shown here in the picture. Now, I went to school, it's been a while. I graduated in 2008. And I was taught back then to have my thighs parallel to the floor with a 90-degree angle between my torso and my thighs. Okay. We know now that's not the best way to sit because of the tightness that it places on the hips. Also sitting this way, it does something weird to our pelvis where our pelvis kind of rolls under, and then we have a flattening of the lumbar curve, which we don't want. That curve is there for a reason. We don't want it to become flat. So when we sit higher, elevated like this, that lumbar curve is intact, our hip angle is open, and it's just a much healthier position for us. I have found sitting on a really good, high quality saddle stool is the easiest way to do this. There's some newer traditional stools out there where you can get decent positioning, but the majority of regular stools, with a flat seat pan in the back that aren't a saddle design, typically don't work for most clinicians. So I do recommend investing in a really high quality saddle stool. I don't recommend the cheap saddle stools from Amazon. Every now and then they'll fit someone. But when you have something that fits everyone from 4 feet tall to 7 feet tall, like it doesn't, there's no such thing as a universal saddle stool. Okay. So we need to get one that really fits us. We've all got different pelvic widths, different inseams, different heights. So we need a saddle that will support us. Also, when you're sitting on your stool, you want your weight evenly distributed. So you don't want all of your weight sitting in your butt. When you sit down, you actually want to shift some of your weight forward into your legs. You want to think of your two legs and your butt like a tripod. and you want your weight evenly distributed between all three. How I used to sit down is I would sit, have all of my weight in my butt, and that just puts a lot of pressure and load on the lumbar discs. Again, it's just a lot of strain for the low back. So you want to almost think of like an athletic stance when you're sitting on your stool. And again, I have a full video, multiple videos on stool adjustments in that resource library. All right, so I did want to note a lot of patient chairs have these adjustable headrests, which is great, but I have found that clinicians just don't know how to use them. But these can be your ergonomic best friend when it comes to proper patient positioning. So I would say most stools, or excuse me, most chairs when I'm doing assessments do have these adjustable headrests. Every now and then there's an older chair that you can't adjust it like this. You can only pull it in and out. But you can still get decent occlusal plane placement with a headrest like that, with like using cushions and just directing your patient. So not the end of the world if you don't have this, but if you do have a chair that has this and you're not used to using it, I hope that you'll be more confident after today, because it really does make a difference. Now, I want to talk about operator positioning. So this is clock positions. There have been some studies where they've plugged electrodes up to clinicians to measure muscle activity depending on what clock position they're in. And do we want more or less muscle activity? Less, right? And so each of these studies showed that as the clinician got up towards the head of the patient, they had less muscle activity. And when they were in that 11 to 1 o'clock position behind the patient, that's where they had the least muscle activity and the most neutral posture. So that's what I recommend. And I'll say too, as a clinician, that's where I'm the most comfortable, is behind the patient. I try to do as much as I can from behind, and that I'm a righty. So I'm like in the 11 to 12 o'clock position. If you're a lefty, you can be over in that 1 o'clock position. But I would say try to use this as your primary clock position. You can't do everything from back here. You can probably do more than you think though. But if you're off to the side in like this 9 or 3 o'clock position, you want to be sure to be squared up. And I have a photo of that on the next slide. But what we want to avoid is the 7 or 5 o'clock side sitting thing that we do, where we've got the legs pointed up towards the head of the patient, and then we're kind of twisting right from the low back. We've got our arm out here. Maybe we've got our head cocked to the side. It's like all of the ergonomic no-nos in one. However, do I catch myself there sometimes? Sure. If I've got a really deep pocket on the mesiofacial number 25, I have to be down in that clock position, but I don't live there. I just do what I need to do, and then I get back into a healthier clock position. And then we've got things like our patients' unique needs. You know, we do have patients that can't or won't lean back in the chair. That's going to kind of dictate where we're at. And then also our clock position does depend on the arch or the tooth being treated, but ideal position should be behind the patient. And just some photos to show you here. This doc is doing great. She's actually a lefty, and I have so much empathy or sympathy for lefties, because a lot of these ops just are not made for left-handed clinicians. But she's doing great here at 12 o'clock. Her assistant is standing. I don't have time to go over assistant positioning specifically in this lecture. That's something I cover in my longer ones. But assistants, they have the highest incidence of low back issues amongst all of us. And if you look at how a lot of them practice in those chairs, they're constantly twisted, right? For sometimes a long time if it's a long procedure. So I do recommend that they try to alternate sitting and standing. It gives their low back a break. It also is a lot easier for them to pivot around when they're standing, and it just helps them. So, but this picture here on the right is what I mean when I say squared up. And if you want a full video on clock positions, that's also in that resource library. I go over all the different clock positions. But this is what I mean when I say squared up. You want your head, shoulders, hips, legs, feet, everything pointed in one direction towards the patient. Okay, so just think about that when you're working. Try to remember, you always want to be squared up. So if you've got your legs pointed one way and your shoulders are pointing another way, that's a twist, right? That is not squared up. So no matter if you're working on patients or charting or whatever it is, try to make sure that everything is pointed in one direction. This is what we want to try to avoid, is the side sitting position, right? She's got her legs pointed up towards the head of the patient. She's leaning really hard on that right hip. If you've heard of the hygiene hip, I'm sure it happens to assistants and dentists too. This is why. She's leaning really hard on that hip. She's also got her arm out in chicken wing. I know you can't see her head, but it's cocked to the side. And something else I want you, and this is how she was taught in school, by the way. And when I was working with her, she was another new, I think she was in her first 6 months out of school, and she works out all the time, very strong and fit and healthy. She was like, I don't think I can do this. Like, I'm in pain all the time, but this is how she was taught. So we just had to kind of break some habits that she had built. But she is also holding the suction in her non-dominant arm. And I talk about this a lot on social media because that's how I was taught too with power scaling. I was told to hold my suction in my non-dominant and then work my power scaler. We don't want to do that for a couple reasons, several reasons. One, when we're holding onto the suction, we can't use our mirror. Our mirror is so important for our posture and visibility. And sure, I mean, you can see a couple teeth with direct vision, but what are you going to do when you working on the distal lingual of like number 14 or number 3? You're going to be upside down, okay? Also, when we're holding onto the suction, we've got that death grip that I talked about, and we're usually out in chicken wing and we're retracting something like a really strong cheek or a strong tongue. So it's just a lot of strain for that non-dominant arm. There's great options now as far as hands-free suction devices, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but I do not recommend holding the suction. And then we want to avoid twisting. Again, if you remember to be squared up, you'll probably notice how much you tend to twist. But this picture here on the right, so this was at my old practice. I worked at this practice for almost 10 years. And this was right when we came back from the lockdown, hence the weird gown and my weird shield, chest shield thing. But anyways, I would do this all the time. I would twist, like I would have my bracket table behind me, and I would twist to get my instruments or twist to get my air water. God knows how many times a day, times 10 years, certainly didn't help the back issues that I ended up with. This is another reason why I really like saddles, because to avoid this, you want to pretend like you're a robot actually, and like rotate or pivot your entire body, get what you need, and then rotate back. Very easy to pivot around in a saddle type stool. It's a little bit more cumbersome in a traditional stool like what I'm using here. And this picture here on the left, this doc, it's not quite as obvious, but she's really tall. She has really long legs. She was using a saddle stool, but she was seated way too low on that. And she literally just didn't know what to do with her legs. So she was doing the spread eagle thing, trying to get close to her patient. So that's a lot of strain on the hips. Plus she's doing a slight twist with her low back. This again was pretty easy. We just had to raise her up on her saddle stool, readjust her patient a little bit, and then she was able to be squared up. And a lot of this ergonomic stuff, it's no genius to it, okay? But it's just a high level of awareness, which isn't easy when we're working on patients, right? And then we've got reaching. I see this a lot, and this is something that is so easily fixed. So when you go into the operatory, you want to think about what you use the most. For me, it's my bracket table where my instruments are. On that bracket table is also my air water, and then I've got my suction on another thing. So I want to make sure that those are nice and close to me. So right when I sit down, I bring my bracket table close to me, like what she should do in this picture here to prevent that reach. I bring my suction close to me, so it's a nice, easy reach. And as I'm moving around the patient, because I'm usually treating the whole mouth, right? As I move in clock positions, I'm keeping in mind that I need to keep those things close so I'm not having to reach. But yes, we are going to have to reach for things. It's the nature of what we do, but we want to avoid this full arm extended reach, especially doing it repetitively. Doing this hundreds of times a day, like some people are doing, is one, it's a waste of time and energy. We only have so much of both, right? But it's a lot of strain on the shoulder and the neck. So just keep things nice and close to you. And then with our mirror, I already mentioned how important indirect vision is. It's one of the biggest things as far as maintaining our posture. Another thing, though, is making sure that we're holding the mirror in the right spot. So if you look at the picture here on the left, I'm actually holding the mirror incorrectly, and you can see my chicken wing. And I see this, like I said, not 100% of the time, but pretty close with clinicians when I'm doing assessments. And it's an easy fix. Well, I won't say it's easy. The technique is easy, but it's like hard to adopt new habits when we're working on patients. But you can see here, the difference here is I'm holding it in the wrong spot there on the left. My arm is out in chicken wing, but when I'm holding it correctly, I can bring that chicken wing in. So what we're trying to do is almost fulcrum with the mirror. So instead of holding the mirror like in the middle of the handle or up at the tip of the handle, we actually want to slide our fingers down towards the head of the mirror and find a rest somewhere. You can see here, I'm resting my fingers on the patient's teeth. You can also rest your pinky or the side of your hand on the patient's face, but sliding your fingers down towards the head of the mirror will automatically bring in that chicken wing and give your non-dominant arm a rest. I think the non-dominant arm is even at more risk for getting injured than our dominant one, because at least our dominant one is moving, right? A lot of times our non-dominant is stuck out here in chicken wing, which is very hard on the body. It's not getting a break. So you've got that isometric contraction that we talked about, and we're retracting a really strong cheek or a strong tongue, where we have to increase our pinch force on that mirror, right? So it's just like so many bad things happening at one time. So just that technique though, it's a little clumsy for me to try to explain it without a video. So I do have a full video on that as well in that resource library, but I call it the mirror slam. I'm not great with names, such as what I came up with, but it'll make sense once you see that video why I call it that. But again, this is kind of a weird habit to get into, but once you do it, you will bring in that chicken wing, and I promise you it's going to feel a lot better to your body. And I understand not all operatories have these movable bracket tables where your instruments are. Okay, I get it. Sometimes it's fixed, but if you do have one that's movable, you want to make sure, again, it's nice and close to you, right? No matter what clock position you're in. And you want to make sure the level of the instruments is at the level of your elbow. So this is, remember the elbow rule with the patient's mouth? It's the same with your instruments. We don't want to be reaching up or down. And I actually was doing an assessment on a dentist, and she had the bracket table too high, and she was reaching mostly for her handpiece. So she was having to reach up, which she was deviating her wrist to grab it. Doing this hundreds of times a day really was killing her wrist. All we had to do was lower that bracket table a couple inches, I think it was, and that was it. It was such an easy fix, but these are the kind of the blind spots that we have when we're practicing and seeing patients, right? And then the overhead light. So I've mentioned this reaching when we're fully extending the arm is not good. Overhead reaching is even more not good. So I don't have a great hack for you for the overhead light other than get a headlamp. It's funny, I've got really nice ergonomic loops, which I love, and I've got a great headlamp. If I had to choose between the two, I think I might choose my headlamp. Like, it's not good if I don't have my headlamp. Luckily, I haven't had mine go out, but if it did, I don't think it would be a good day for stuff. So these headlamps, and whether or not you use loops or not, there's headlamps that clip onto safety glasses, and then obviously your loops, but they're fixed to you. You don't have to deal with the shadowing. The quality of light is a lot brighter than that of the overhead light, and you're not having to constantly reach overhead to adjust it. So those are great. Okay, let's talk about patient positioning. Now we're putting ourselves first, right? We've got our stool adjusted. We've got everything brought nice and close to us. Now we're going to focus on the patient. Now, this is going to be a super quick crash course in patient positioning. There's a lot more to cover, okay, but there's more resources in that resource library for you. But we've got two main positions. We've got full supine, where the patient is basically parallel to the floor. And then we've got semi-supine. And the full supine, usually that's what we use for the upper teeth. And then we've got semi-supine, where the patient is raised up about 20 or 30 degrees. And we usually use this position for the lower arch. But let's go back to the upper. The first thing you want to do when you recline your patient back is have, and I'm going to cover difficult situations here in a little bit. Okay, so this is like just in general. But the first thing we want to do when we recline the patient back is have them scoot all the way to the top of the chair. We want the top of their head in line with the top of the headrest, and the top of their shoulders in line with the top of the backrest. This is where those adjustable headrests come into play. They can really help you with occlusal plane placement, but the patient's entire head has to be on that headrest. So if I'm here at 12 o'clock and I've got my patient in front of me and they're reclined, when I look down, I don't want to see any visible headrest. Even if it's an inch or two, it doesn't seem like it's a lot, but those are inches I'm going to have to make up for, right, when I start working on them. So have them scoot all the way up. Now for the upper arch, we need the maxillary arch in a certain spot. To do this, we need the chin tipped up towards the ceiling. So if you look at the headrest there, I've got it declined, which naturally is going to force the patient's chin to go up towards the ceiling. I understand though that this can be uncomfortable for some patients. That's why I use cushions. I talk about these all the time because they make such a big difference. They support the patient's head and neck. They're very comfortable for the patient, but they also get the occlusal planes where they need to be. So if you've, sometimes people have a nice headrest on their patient chair and they can do this without a cushion, but I mean, for most people, using a cushion is a game changer. But if we go back to the maxillary plane of occlusion, what I want you to imagine when your patient is reclined and their mouth is open, I want you to imagine a vertical line going through their mouth. We want the maxillary teeth behind that vertical line. I mean, ideally it's like 10 to 20 degrees, but honestly, the more the better. Because again, if I'm at 12 o'clock and I've got my patient in front of me and these are their teeth, I want their teeth pointed back towards me. So it's a nice, easy reach and I can just work on them. If those teeth are in front of the vertical line, what am I going to have to do? I'm going to have to reach forward or lean forward or kind of strain to work on those teeth. So we need those teeth to be pointed back towards us. Again, using a cushion. I've got a video on exactly how I use these cushions in that resource library. I use it differently depending on the upper versus the lower arch. But this will kind of lock the head into position and get the occlusal plane where we need it to be. But once we've got the head angle correct, then we need to raise or lower the patient chair so that their mouth is at our elbow level. Also, don't be afraid to ask your patient to move for you. In this case, tip their chin up. I'm constantly asking my patients to move during the appointment, so don't be afraid to do that. Okay, and then when we go to the lower arch, we're actually going to raise the patient chair up, the back of the patient chair about 20 or 30 degrees. And now we need the chin tipped more down towards the chest, not crazy down, okay, because there is too far when that happens and then it makes it hard to see, but just a bit more down towards the chest. But to do this, we're going to ask them, please nod your chin towards your chest. We're going to adjust the headrest. If you see here, it's not declined anymore. It's more flat in line with the back of the patient chair. And again, using cushions, I flip the cushion around, use it a different way for the lower arch. But now we need the mandibular plane in a different spot. So we're still going to use that vertical line, but now we want the maxillary teeth close to or in front of that vertical line. Because when the patient opens their mouth, the mandible is going to be more parallel with the floor. And then again, because we've raised them up, we then need to raise or lower vertically the patient chair so that their mouth is at our elbow level. But it's very different. Occlusal plane placement is very different whether we're talking about the upper or the lower arch. And how I used to practice and what I see clinicians doing is they will recline the patient to whatever position and then they don't move. The headrest doesn't move. They don't move side to side. The vertical height doesn't move, which is great for the patient, but it makes it really hard for us, right? We start doing all these acrobatics in order to see them. So we need to be very deliberate when we're talking about the upper versus the lower arch. And again, these cushions make a big difference with supporting the patient's head and also getting the occlusal plane where we need them to be. So I've got videos about how to use those and the link for those cushions in that resource library. Okay, so let's talk about overcoming some challenges. We've got pedo patients. By the way, don't look at the clinician's posture, but her patient positioning is really good. When we're talking about pedo, the rules don't change whether we're talking about a tiny human or a regular size human. Okay, so we need to have them scoot all the way to the top of the chair. If you see here, the patient's head is all the way on that headrest. The shoulders are in line with the top of the backrest. She's even using a booster cushion here. Because if you think about when we're having someone small, like a kid or even a petite adult, scoot so high in the chair, the contour of the chair doesn't fit the contour of their body anymore. And then that's when they start to get fidgety and squirmy and say that they're uncomfortable. If we can start plugging up these areas with cushions and support their back or their legs, they're going to be a lot more comfortable, which is going to help us. Okay. And then elderly patients. So a lot of times they'll come in with this severe forward head position and something called kyphosis, which is this excessive curvature of the upper back, AKA the hunchback. It's very hard for them to comfortably lean back in the chair. And then of course it's hard for us because we want to keep them comfortable, but we also need them to lay back. And so I put together a post in that resource library. It's like my top 9 tips for reclining patients who have a hard time laying back. But if I've got an elderly patient that comes in, I will always use a cushion. I've even got a thicker cushion for elderly patients that helps kind of support that forward head position. Once I started using them, I had like 90, 95-year-olds that would lean all the way back into full supine with that cushion because their head was supported. So they really do make a difference. But if I've got an elderly patient that maybe can't lean back in the chair because of COPD or even patients with vertigo or something, I will stand. That's going to give me, and my posture is not going to be perfect. It's not always going to be perfect, but I will have more opportunity for a better posture if I'm standing versus if I'm sitting and trying to work on them like this. I've also got a couple techniques called the pre-recline and the slow lean back that work really well that is in that post in the resource library. But if I used to think when patients would come in and they would ask for cushions or pillows, I'd be like, oh my God, they're so extra. They're going to be high maintenance. This is going to be a tough appointment. I don't think that anymore, because the more comfortable we keep our patient, the more compliant they're going to be with us, right? So whether it's using cushions, like I always use the neck cushion or a low back one or even a knee one, depending on the patient, especially if they've got back or neck issues. But even if we're giving them headphones or music or the TV or blankets or whatever, some offices do like aromatherapy and what's that? The paraffin on the hand, it might seem extra, and maybe it is, but if we're going above and beyond with our patients, they will see that. And it's going to make them more at ease, less anxious, and more compliant when we need them to get into these positions like full supine to work on the upper arch. So it really does make a difference. Now let's talk about other ergonomic equipment considerations. We've talked about stools. I am a fan of saddle stools, but there's a lot of different kinds out there. And I think it's important to try out different ones to make sure that it supports your pelvis. So I know what stools work for me, but I can't necessarily tell you exactly what stool is going to work for you. Like I probably would have a good idea, but there's a lot of different ones out there. There are some people who have something called lordosis. Well, okay, lordosis is actually the inner curvature of that lumbar spine. We all have it, but some people have excessive lordosis. So it's like too much of a curve. And when they sit in a saddle, because of the way a saddle is designed to actually reinforce that curve, it's like puts too much pressure on it and it's uncomfortable for them. So if that's the case, I would recommend a stool like the assistant stool there. I know that is an assistant stool, but they have this design in a regular operator stool as well. But if you look at the seat pan, it's not square or rectangular like the regular operator stools. It's triangular. It's more like a bike seat. And this way, it's not putting pressure on the lumbar spine. It's got a really nice backrest there as well, but they can actually tip the seat pan forward and they still have the benefit of having their legs kind of out to the side and out of the way, and they can get really good positioning with their patient. But again, making sure that you're investing in something that's really high quality and not just getting something because it's cheap off of Amazon. They're typically not made well too, and they fall apart pretty quickly. And then loops. So I have mentioned that I really like the ergonomic deflection style loops. Okay, those have worked well for me. I've worked with that style of loop for 4 or 5 years at this point. And that's the reason I can have my ear vertically stacked on top of my shoulder and have really good posture. Now, some people can't tolerate those type of loops, or they've been practicing for a really long time and they're just like, there's no way that I can, transition to using something like that. There is a bit of a learning curve with them, but there are options for traditional loops as well. Like what I'm showing there on the left. Those are a more traditional, they're kind of a hybrid style loop between a traditional loop and an ergo loop because of how they're designed, but they're a bit more intuitive. The learning curve typically isn't as steep as it is with the ergo style loop, and clinicians who have been practicing for decades who know they can't use an ergo loop would do better with this kind of hybrid style. But the most important thing is, no matter what kind of loop you have, is to make sure it's ergonomic. And remember, ergonomic means you have to have your ear vertically stacked on top of the shoulder. If you look at my picture there on the left, my ear is still on top of my shoulder, so that's neutral. I am having to tip my head forward a little bit, but as long as we're not exceeding about 20 degrees, it's still okay for the neck. But the danger is, like I mentioned in the picture before with me in the yellow, when my head was like jutted out forward and I was tipping my head down, that's where the problem is. So if you put on your loops and you realize that you have to do that, that's putting a lot of strain on your back. And I think it is, if you're planning to spend any time in dentistry, it's really worthwhile to invest in a high quality ergonomic loop. We've only got one neck, right? And it needs to last us a long time. I've already mentioned, by the way, this is what you're not supposed to do with the suction, but I don't recommend holding the suction when you're using your handpiece or your power scaler. So making sure you are using some kind of suction device. I am very keen on the hands-free suction devices. There's a lot of different ones out there. There's one that go onto your saliva ejector, your HVE, some control aerosols, some don't, but I really like the ones that you can just plug into the patient's mouth. They're nice and dry and comfortable, and you're not having to hold on to it. Also, cordless polishers. There's a lot of them on the market. I swear I'm like going to get buried with mine. I love it so much. You don't realize how hard that cord is pulling on you until it's not there anymore. So cordless polishers, I think, are a worthwhile investment. Also making sure that you're using great prophy angles. I think that we've all, used really cheap ones and the really good ones, and that they can make a difference. Ear protection is also something I'm talking about more. We are prone in dentistry to hearing damage. I have hearing damage, and I'm sure that it's because I spent so long not using hearing protection. So these are the ones I use. I got them off of Amazon. It's best. I actually did a podcast episode on hearing damage. It's always best to get something custom fitted for you. I haven't taken that step yet as of now, but these ones work great. And it's not an ear plug. So people think that it's like an earplug, like the ones you use to go to sleep if you use those. These are, you plug them in and it's just turning down the volume of everything. It's not blocking everything out. You don't have to have your patient shouting at you. You're not shouting at your patient. It just kind of turns down the volume. I keep mine in all day. I don't even take them out at lunch. And something else I have noticed is they really reduce anxiety. I typically, and I don't know if it's an age thing or what, but I'm becoming very easily stimulated, especially with noise, and it really ramps up my anxiety. So that was a side benefit of using these. It's really nice. I use them at sporting events and concerts too. So make sure that you start using those, because again, once we have hearing damage, we can't really correct it, right? I mean, there's things that we can use, but we'd rather prevent it in the first place. Okay, so I gave you a lot of information. That was a lot in a short amount of time. I actually have a turtle. His name is Gooey. And every time I give him his plate of lettuce, it's like so much lettuce. And I'm like, there is no way he's going to get through this. He always does just one bite at a time, right? So think of that like with ergonomics, one thing at a time. Just focus on one thing, maybe 1 week, master it, move on to something else. Don't go in there and try to change 10 things all at once. Like, we've already got enough things to worry about. So just pick one thing at a time and go from there. This is how you can contact me. Again, you can just Google Stephanie Botts, but you've got my website here, my email. This QR code has everywhere where I'm active online if you want to connect with me there and check out my content. But I want to be here for you as a resource, whether you need me now or 10 years from now, I don't care. Just know that there's someone out there that gets it and wants to help you. So thank you all so much for your time. Let me know if you have any questions. And again, thank you, Crest, for allowing me to speak on your platform.